And we are very excited to be joined by Bridget Condon from the NFL Network. And I was saying, Bridget, it's good to see you virtually. We saw you out here for training camp for a little bit, but training camp feels like a lifetime ago. How are you? How is life? I know you're getting ready to ship off to Detroit here in a little bit.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's so funny being at training camps. Everything is so positive. Every team's winning the Super Bowl. Everybody is healthy. And then now we're 8 weeks in and all that has kind of gone out the window.
Yeah, the war of attrition as it goes every single year in the NFL. But, you know, we were excited to have you on for a bunch of reasons, but the main one is this, right? We've heard from Coach McDaniels all week, and we've heard from the players that we don't see a lot of Raiders-Lions matchups, right? He said, you know, we had to really kind of educate our guys on who the Lions were, what they bring to the table. And it really is the same for the fan base, right? These two teams don't get together very often. It's been a hot minute since they've played a football game. When you look at the Detroit Lions, kind of help make me a little bit smarter. What do they do really well in 2023?
Well, I think they have that grit, right? And it starts from Dan Campbell. And I've seen this team evolve the past 2-3 seasons, really start to believe in themselves and believe of the talent on the team, right? You have all these teams that have talent, but if the pieces aren't clicking, it doesn't matter, right? We just kind of talked off camera. I cover the Chargers, a team that has a lot of talent on that roster, doesn't seem to all mesh together at the right moment right now. Same kind of for the Raiders as well. And I think the Lions do such a good job of making those pieces stand out. Jared Goff having that confidence in himself, just being so much more successful this season, it feels like. And I mean, they've gotten a lot of help in the draft. Of course, that's a big part of it. Aidan Hutchinson is playing great football and getting to quarterback. So I think just having that kind of identity of, hey, we got knocked down, but we are good. We are talented. We believe in ourselves, and we're going to go back out there and bounce back.
You know, you bring up Jared Goff, obviously the guy under center for the Detroit Lions, but it feels like, at least from like a casual NFL fan, right? It feels like the Jared Goff that we're seeing now is a lot different than the Jared Goff that we saw in Los Angeles a few seasons ago. Like, what is kind of fit for him? What is working for him in Detroit?
Yeah, I think a lot of different things. One of the guys that I've talked to this week, which is kind of interesting, is Josh Reynolds. And you remember those two guys have played together more than any receiver on that Lions team, because they were together in LA. And then obviously he's been back in Detroit with Jared, and just that connection, that familiarity, and St. Brown too, like playing really well. So I think it's just the confidence that I see Jared Goff playing with, and kind of believing in himself and being in the right system that uses his talents and the things he's good at, to his advantage.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We look at the, all this week we've tried to kind of do our best deep dive on the Lions, right? Learn the Lions. What do they do well? What are their kind of areas of improvement, all that. But you look at the Lions offense, right? An explosive offense. All the stats are top 10 in pretty much everything. But we've talked to a bunch of people and it says like, yeah, they're obviously really explosive on offense. They do a lot of exciting things, but they're more than just an explosive offense. Kind of from your perspective, you talked about that grit that this team plays with. What else kind of makes the Lions tick? And obviously they had a tough week last weekend, but what really makes them so efficient outside of that really explosive offense side of the football?
Well, on offense specifically, or you mean on defense too?
Overall, just in general. I guess the defense, too, also certainly a formidable side of the football for Dan Campbell's football team.
Yeah, I think, their run game is great too. And it starts, I think where they're their best is in the trenches, right? Like having such a good offensive line, defensive line that are allowing them to be so successful. I think that they've done a really good job the past couple seasons in building that depth, even when a guy like David Montgomery goes down, to still find other pieces and have success deeper into their bench. I think that's what makes them so good. And it's like when one man goes down, you feel like that level doesn't drop off. And I think that touches on the the grit and everything that we keep saying about this Lions team.
One battle that I know fans are excited to see, and the two guys that aren't necessarily going to be playing against each other, but you look at these defensive edge rushers, right? You got Maxx Crosby on the Raiders side. You got Aidan Hutchinson, a young dude who's really playing a solid brand of football right now. I mean, when you look at Aidan Hutchinson, I know you talked about him a little bit earlier, how has he been able to become such an efficient, game-wrecking type of dude this early in his career?
I just love his story. I remember doing a Lions game preseason last year. I believe it was his first time playing at Ford Field, and just hearing the story of he grew up like a couple miles away from it, and just like he lives and breathes the Lions. And I think He's had some good coaching. It's going to be really interesting to see Maxx Crosby and him like 1 and 2 in the NFL in snaps played since he joined the league. I think he's just been in a good position. I think he fits in really well to their defense. And I think, we saw it in college. He's a very talented player, and it seems like he hasn't really missed a beat transitioning to the NFL, which can be an issue for these guys when you get to a faster level and going up against bigger guys. We see sometimes these edge rushers struggle, but for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like he has it all.
Just speaking of Maxx Crosby, and I think what's been really exciting for fans of the silver and black is certainly the record is not where we want to be right now. A lot of runway left in the season, but one guy who's playing at a Pro Bowl, all-pro level is number 98. And I think it's been really exciting for us to where you talk about Maxx a year ago, 2 years ago. The main thing was the motor, right? A guy who just keeps going and going and going, which he still does, right? I mean, this dude is like at 110% energy at all times, but it feels like he's kind of evolved and matured in his game, right? Now more of a tactician, a guy who can beat you in a handful of ways. When you kind of, as a member of the national media, how do you think the conversation around Maxx has changed in the past couple seasons?
I think you've just seen him mature more, right? And I think even talking to him when we were out there for training camp, just having a conversation off the field, you can see it, you can sense it, you can see the way that he treats his body, both on and off the field, the things he's doing to rehab, to practice every day. He's just at a different level. I think when some of these guys come into the league, they're so young and it takes some time to really put it all in perspective and get into a great groove. But he is playing, in my opinion, some of his best football. He's obviously had at least a half a sack in 5 straight games, which I believe is the longest streak of his career. So to see him really step into that, you don't want to call him old, right? But like into that more veteran
for sure.
Role, and just kind of like, obviously he's crazy on the field, but it feels like there's a sense of calmness too. Like he's more secure in himself. He's more like he just feels more stable in what he's doing and more mature. And I think that's huge, especially for this Raiders team.
Yeah, I think the word that always comes to mind when we talk about Maxx is grounded, right? He feels a little more kind of sure of himself, secure in who he is, what he brings to the table. And you're right, man. He's playing an incredible brand of football right now. We're hopeful as we sit here on a Friday that we are going to see Jimmy G in Detroit in a few days' time. And I think what's been really frustrating kind of in the early goings is you go back to that Patriots game, and look, the Raiders offense has not been perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it felt like they were kind of getting on track there towards the end of that game. Obviously, Jimmy misses last week in Chicago dealing with injury. I mean, just in a very general sense, and it might seem like such a silly question, but how important is it to be consistent at the quarterback position, to have the same guy in there week after week after week? We're not even halfway home, Bridget, and the Raiders have 3 different guys start under center.
Oh, it's incredibly important. I think if you're talking about a quarterback who maybe was the quarterback of this team for the past decade, maybe we could be talking about a different situation. But especially when Jimmy Garoppolo is new to this team, having that consistency with the receivers, even just to the timing or to where these receivers like the ball, or where, that's what made Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams so good, because they knew each other so well. They played together so well. It takes time to build that consistency on both sides of it, on the receiver side and on the quarterback side. So the biggest thing, the most important thing, of course, is having that stability. And if Jimmy can be out there, it completely changes the game for this Raiders team. Their 3 wins only coming while he's been the starter. So I think people are underestimating how big of an impact that has had early in this season for the Raiders as well.
Yeah, and like I said, this entire fan base is going to be keeping their eyes peeled on that injury report the next couple of days and hopeful that Jimmy is out there Monday night doing his thing. But before we let you go, just speaking about Monday night, right? It's the best game of the week, prime time, lights are going to be shining. Everyone in the NFL world is going to be watching that game in Detroit. You're going to be in the house. What do you expect that environment to be like?
I think it's going to be crazy. I just was reading the research notes, and it's the first Monday night game, I believe, since 2018 at home in Detroit. And, yes, Detroit had that bad loss to the Ravens last week. But before that, when you went on NFL.com and looked at the standings, they were at the top, right? So there's just so much hype. Of course, there were other teams that were 5-1, but because of the alphabetical order, Detroit was at the top. And for that fan base to feel that is amazing. Like, these fans live and breathe Detroit. They've been through the ride, the roller coaster, as Raiders fans have as well. I think it's going to be such a good game for both teams too. This is a pivotal game for the Raiders. I think a lot of people are maybe not giving them the credit that they do deserve. But I think this is a chance for the Raiders to make things happen. And if they are able to get a win in Detroit on Monday Night Football, we're going to be having a completely different conversation next week, because it's crazy. I keep saying, like, I cover the Chargers, but to think that the Raiders are second in the AFC West, right? It kind of is funny to me, it seems like they're not, but they are. They have the second best record. So there's so much football left to be played. And with a win Monday night, things could be completely different next week.
You know what? I appreciate a little levity there, right? I appreciate it. The sky isn't falling, right? Obviously last week in Chicago didn't go the way that this team wants, but it's just one game. And it's the beauty of kind of what we do, right? We get to overreact to the wins, overreact to the losses. And
everybody has a bad loss, right?
Yeah.
It's about if you have two in a row.
Exactly. And this is what we've been saying all week. As crazy as it sounds, for the highs and the lows, the Raiders find a win a game against a really good Detroit team on Monday night. We're halfway home, sitting at 500. And I guarantee you that 99.9% of this fan base would have taken that when we talked to them in July, last time we saw you out here at training camp. But Bridget, we appreciate you hanging out with us. Where can the people find you on Monday night as you're covering the game for the NFL Network?
Yeah, I'll be on NFL Network doing pregame hits ahead of the game, and then social media as well. It's going to be fun. It's going to be crazy, I think. Yeah,
it'll be fun. We're looking forward to it. And like I said, hopefully, come Tuesday, we're enjoying a Victory Tuesday for once instead of the opposite. Well, Bridget, it was so great to see you. Thank you for hanging out with us. Safe travels to Detroit, and we'll talk with you soon, okay?
All right. Thanks so much.